I would like to introduce the chair, Dr. Farzana Shaikh, Associate Fellow, Asia Pacific Program, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, London, United Kingdom. So we are thankful for her, and she is going to chair the session for today, the first one. I also would like to request our learned speakers for today to come and take their seat on the stage. Mr. Maung Zarni, founder of the Free Burma and Free Rohingya coalitions and the Forces of Renewal for Southeast Asia, Kent, United Kingdom. Please, sir. Okay, thank you. Mr. Muhammad Yahya, United Nations Resident Coordinator in Pakistan, in Islamabad. Thank you, sir. We have an interactive session, and the session will be conducted by Dr. Shaista Tabassum, Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Karachi. I leave the proceedings to the chair. Thank you.
Well, firstly, thank you all for being here. It's early, but with good reason. We have a lot to talk about this morning. But I must start first by thanking Dr. Masuma Hasan and the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs. I've been coming here now for several years, and it has been really both a pleasure and a very great privilege to receive these invitations and to see how year on, year in, the standard of discussion has been of a consistently high standard. And this conference that we are at today is no exception. So thank you, Dr. Masuma, for giving us this opportunity to share ideas. Today's session is basically going to take this format for those of you who need some enlightening on the matter. I will just very briefly set the context of today's discussions. Then I will leave my distinguished presenters to give us their take on the subject of genocide and human rights violations. It will be followed, the third presentation will be followed, as we've just heard, by an interactive session, which we hope will then morph easily into a broader question and answer session. I will not be taking up too much time towards the end because I really want to leave my presenters and, of course, the audience with maximum time to get into this discussion. So, as I said, I will briefly set a context to today's discussion and then perhaps respond very, very briefly, a couple of minutes towards the end. So, really, I think we can all sort of agree that over the last day or so, we've heard a great deal and had very diverse viewpoints about Bandung and what it might mean for us today. And to my mind, really, 70 years after Bandung, the question is not so much how we revive or resurrect the spirit of Bandung, so much as how best do we adapt its ideals to a radically different and arguably more complex world than that which prevailed in the 1950s in the immediate aftermath of decolonization. Now, for it seems to me that those stark polarities which defined that era and that Bandung world, divided by what the American socialist historian W.E.B. Du Bois called the color line, white and non-white, between colonizer and colonized, is, I believe, on closer scrutiny, much more blurred than Bandung imagined, and less, I think, than we may be prepared to countenance today. Now, we heard yesterday of some of the complexities that have emerged since Bandung. Mr. Javed Jabbar alluded, for example, to the insidious grip of what he called internal colonialism, when nation states subject their own population to degrees of repression that we commonly associate or associated with foreign colonial powers. Pakistan, of course, is no stranger to the language of internal colonialism, and I think it is fair to say that the cases of East Pakistan and Balochistan today speak volumes about these swirling allegations of internal colonialism. But so too are other signatories of that original Bandung Declaration, such as China, which faces today allegations of internal colonialism in its treatment of the Uyghur Muslim population in Xinjiang province. Then again, yesterday, we also heard from Tom Morrow of the malign nexus that now prevails and that rests, he argues, on the nefarious activities of external players, external stakeholders, middle powers who interfere in the affairs of other countries and whose activities actually significantly disempower and disenfranchise local populations, resulting in accentuating conflict and worsening humanitarian crises. Finally, the grim subject of this panel will, I'm sure, provide ample and damning evidence of just how far we have strayed from the ideals of Bandung. One has only to look at the catastrophe in Gaza, and I very much hope that we will be able to discuss this extremely contested subject with a degree of nuance and thoughtfulness that will cast more light than heat on an already overheated subject. By which I mean, of course, I very much hope that today we will be able to leave this panel with a clearer understanding of how precisely to differentiate between such loaded terms as ethnic cleansing and genocide. Because the fact remains that Bandung itself offered no template for an understanding of these terms, although it must be said that the Holocaust and the UN Declaration in 1945 did in fact seek to do so. So without any further ado, I will simply introduce my panelists. Sitting to my far right is Dr. Shaista Tabassum, who's Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Karachi. She will be talking to us about the meanings of genocide and what we call impunity. She has a postdoctoral degree in public international law from the Hague Academy of Law in the Netherlands. And as I said, she has served at the University of Karachi and served 3 times, if I'm not mistaken, as chairperson of the Department of International Relations. To my immediate right is Mr. Mohammed Yahya of Somalia, who took up his post as the UN resident coordinator in Pakistan in January this year, and he will serve as the UN humanitarian coordinator in this country. Mr. Yahya has extensive experience in Africa, and he got his degree in history from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Mr. Yahya will be talking to us about Sudan, another terrible catastrophe and humanitarian crisis that endures to this day. He will be talking to us, as I said, about Sudan, the civil war, and human rights violations. Finally, to my left is Dr. Maung Zarni, who's founder of the Free Burma and Free Rohingya coalitions, a scholar and an activist, extremely active as well, both on social media as well as the broadcast and print media. He interestingly, very interestingly, after got his PhD from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, but also worked under the supervision of one of the pioneering experts on Himmler and the SS. So he should be able to shed some light on genocide. So I think really without any further ado, I'm going to pass on to first Dr. Zarni, who will be speaking to us on, now where is it? The good and the bad genocides. So, Dr. Zarni.
Good morning, and thank you so much to the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs, and in particular, Dr. Masuma Hasan and her very able team. And I feel very at home here. Always wanted to come to Pakistan because we have close ties with Pakistan going back to our independence. I want to start my 15 minutes with a somewhat personal comment, because in professional settings or political setting as such as this one, we are to speak about things, in a very professional manner, academic or analytical language, and talking about things in personal terms is usually considered frowned upon. But I want to, because it's Bandung, we're talking about something that happened 70 years ago, and that has shaped the development of political consciousness of many of us in the in Asia, as well as in Africa and the formerly colonized societies. We're talking about intergenerational event that took place 70 years ago in Bandung, Indonesia. But this is how my consciousness was shaped, and my parents are no more. My mother was university student activist at Mendeley University, and my father was not politically involved, although they were in the same era. But both of them, instilled in me two things. Conscience that needs to be lived, and the love of truth. And those two things over the years, when my faith is shaken, about my own ability as an activist or a scholar, or when I go through difficult times, those two things serve me as guides, guiding principle, conscience and love of truth. So these two things are very important, because we are looking at the phenomena which is not simply legal or as in criminal act perpetrated by two states, Myanmar in this case against the Rohingya, who are predominantly Muslims. They are my fellow Myanmar people, but they're not considered as such because they were constructed falsely as invaders from former East Pakistan, today's Bangladesh since 1971. And then the other one is the Zionist state of Israel. And those are two very radically different cases. One involves settler colonial project, the most vicious form of colonialism, as Noam Chomsky put it. You know, we all came from formerly colonized societies, and we know what colonialism was, how we experience it in all its dimensions. But settler colonialism is colonialism on steroid, put it that way. And it's still alive. And because I'm not legally trained, and so I won't talk about the international legal aspect, but I'm a sociologist by training, and so I look at genocide in its original socio-legal construction, brilliantly developed by Raphael Lemkin, the then Polish Jewish legal scholar and rather mad activist who campaigned for the emergence of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So the first thing I want to say is genocides are not just simply crime of the state. It's the crime where both the state and majority in the society collaborate to perpetrate. What do they perpetrate? Well, before I get into any comparative remarks, I want to put genocide in the most simple, street-level language. Genocide is simply a process of an ethno-religious state. States are all informed by or anchor in some kind of ethnic, religious, and national identities. States are not neutral body, nor are they simply political in a narrow sense. They are ethno-religious states. Buddhist, Hindutva in India, Islamist states, Judeo state, and then God Save America, that's like, Christian state, or as they like to see it. It's a process of an ethno-religious state destroying. The key word in genocide is not just simply killing. Mass killing is only one of the 5 acts legally enunciated. It is destruction in a coordinated fashion. I mean, as a matter of policy. Not a crime of passion. It's coordinated, cold-blooded plan. It's not about individuals. It's about destroying human groups, usually in genocidal situation, whether it's Nazi Germany or Burma or like Israel. Victim populations have distinct identities, and usually they are multiple groups who are victims. Genocidal states do not stop at a single population. Nazi Germany have, the Jewish population were the majority victims. There are numerous other victims, Sinti, Romers, disabled German children, and others, that the underhumans, subhumans. So not everyone has to be killed or has to be destroyed for something to be pronounced genocide, right? That's why the key part is destruction of a human group in whole or in part. And what is left in the legal definition of a genocide is that these are not just simply ideologically driven crimes committed by the state with the popular support of the majority public. When a state commits genocide, a society has already been primed. Yeah? That's why the Buddhist monks, cheerleading, Aung San Suu Kyi trying to cover up. Yeah? And they involve material gains. It's not just the Nazi SS who built death camps and crematorium with architecturally designed vault where gold teeth was melted into bars. Yeah? Material gains. Land is almost always an issue. Land is involved. And that this is not in the UN Convention. Material gains are always there. So I look at two cases. One case alone would take hours to discuss. And so, I have maybe like 10 more minutes. So I'll go through quickly. There are two issues that keep me awake at night. One is the deeply troubling internecine conflict in my own birth country of Burma. It's been going on since 1948, March, when the Burmese communists went underground, followed by different ethnic groups fighting for political autonomy. The civil war, the rights violations, and the genocide perpetrated in my name as a Burmese Buddhist. That keeps me awake for 37 years as an exile. The other issue is Palestine. Since October 8th, we watched the most gruesome images of genocidal killings and destruction on our phone. These days, I don't watch television because I need to preserve my sanity, because we are all like secondarily traumatized. And so also the other thing is, we are not physical scientists who observe how the atom or subatomic particles behave. And then we go home, eat dinner, and have good time with family. We cannot switch on. Yeah? And it affects us. If you study genocide, you are not affected. You are either not really understanding what is happening, or you don't have the capacity, moral and psychological capacity, to allow yourself to be impacted by what you observe. So I don't distance myself from this phenomena. Yeah? So when I discovered that my own country was perpetrating genocide, I started digging more, because I did not have a training in what is called genocide studies. I was educated to be a sociologist and developer of curriculum. It just so happened that one of my advisors was an American military intelligence officer who enlisted as a Harvard student to go and fight the Nazi. He was German-American, first-generation refugee German-American. Because of his German language faculty, he was assigned to the intelligence unit that interrogated surrendered mid-ranking SS officers in the American section of the occupied post-Nazi Germany in Munich and other places. So it became handy when I started digging what my own society and the Burmese military were doing to this population. Only 2 million out of, say, 50 million, portraying them as a threat to national security because their religious identity is Islam or Muslim. So that, and this is going on since 1978. They were framed as illegal immigrants from Bangladesh, left over from the British colonial era. Never mind that the boundaries before the British came in were fluid. There were no hard boundaries. They were like, geomorphologically, if you go to like Chittagong area, Bangladesh or East Pakistan, and Burma, it's a seamless, geography. It's, from one village to another, there were no markers. There were a lot of cultural interactions, even like interracial marriages between Buddhists and Muslims. And then all of a sudden, the military wanted to eject them all. Mass deportation, right? That's what the Gaza, mass deportation by force, by destruction. And so I did, my wife and I did a 3-year study of this, and because I was unable to go to Burma, so she was able to get in. She's from England. And we collaborated a 3-year study for the University of Washington Law School that became the first study that looked at the Rohingya situation, not just simply through the humanitarian perspective, but through the genocide framework. But then again, not strictly in the legal sense, but sociological sense of a genocide, destruction of this population. There are no guest chambers. There are no SS officers. But you don't need guest chambers for something to be called genocide, right? And if you can incinerate people from the sky, with 2,000-pound bunker busters, you don't need guest chambers. Look at what Israel has been doing. And so that was me, the picture. I put on my Burmese national dress, the jacket, and then moved 30-kilogram marble Buddha from our living room into the garden because I wanted to show that when the whole society rejected this population for no fault of their own, posing no threat to our way of life, to the state, and simply because they happen to be Muslims and they happen to be, next to one of the largest Muslim countries in the world, So this creation of the false perception of Muslims as a threat. And then this gels with the Western media portrayal of Muslims as a priori terrorists. Before it was not Muslim. Before it was like Arabs when I was growing up. When you say Arabs, you don't need to say Arab terrorists. You assume that they will be terroristic. Yeah? So the Burmese military, they exploited that Western construction, this Orientalist construction. There are two constructions. Buddhists are good into meditation, like Hindu, yoga, like these Orientals, good Orientals. Muslims, restive, resistant, fearsome against colonial domination, bad Oriental. So this Buddhist genocide, that rattles the Western stereotype of Buddhism. And then, but they kept it, 2 minutes, okay. There are factors that shape this narrative. The institutionalized slow burning of Myanmar genocide, it's like homegrown Buddhist religious bigotry. Then the Buddhists are they see themselves, or we see ourselves as minority in the world, like 1.5 billion Muslims, 2 billion Christians and others, right? So the Sri Lankan Buddhists, Burmese Buddhists, we suffer from this. We're majority in our own country. We have this inferiority minority complex. We are threatened by the others who are not Buddhist, right? And then we also have this colonial era anti-Indian subcontinental racism. Doesn't have to be, you just have to look Indo-Aryan, and then we would have a racist reaction. In Burma. I know Pakistani military is very close to the Burmese military, but that's an institutional interest. But in terms of, yeah, exactly. But the Israel is, let me say a few things about Israel. This is the most important thing about the genocide that is going on in Israel today. This is a long-standing savagery of European settlers and colonizers that goes back to the first voyage of transatlantic slave trade in 1441. And this is, if you read this is Dominican father protesting against what he witnessed in these newly conquered Spanish territories in the Caribbean. Say, tell me, by what right or justice do you hold these Indians in such cruel and horrible slavery? By what right do you wage such detestable wars in these people who lived idly and peacefully in their own lands, where you have consumed infinite numbers of them with unheard of murders and desolations? So because a group of Dominican priests who were there to do the missionary work were protesting against what their own Spaniard fellows were doing, the Castilian monarchy brought together, I'll finish in 30 seconds, Christian scholars to provide public relations cover. So in 1511, all the Spaniard soldiers, cavaliers, and any other mercenaries that were there to subjugate the natives of what they call the New World. The purpose was gold and land. That's why I said material gains are always there. It wasn't the crime of passion or simply bigotry, right? They're always gaining something. Even crusades were more, most of the people fighting there were motivated by the material gains, not for Jesus Christ. And so all those soldiers were required by the Spanish Castilian monarch to read this. We protest that the debts and losses which shall accrue from this are your fault, the victim's fault, and not that of the highnesses or ours or the cavaliers who came with us. This is like a Golda Meir saying, I hate the Arabs because they make our sons kill them. You see? This is like 500 years tradition. This is what is going on. This isn't simply October 7th. So just have a think. This is a long-running, dishonorable European tradition. Before, the victims of the Christian Europe were the Jewish population. Now they coupled this incompatible term, Judeo-Christian civilization. Christian civilization, as Chomsky put it, mass killing among themselves was the pastime. Now, the Israeli Zionism and Western Christian informed imperialism, they merge. what we are seeing is worse than what we saw in 1940s Germany under Nazis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maung. Well, I will pass on now to Mr. Mohammed Yahya, who is going to talk to us about Sudan and the untold violence we've witnessed in that country, along with one of the worst humanitarian crises in modern times. So, Mr. Mohammed, on to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. First, allow me to thank Ambassador Dr. Masuma Hasan for inviting me. But also, I am told, as a diplomat, if you make it to the Pakistan Institute for International Affairs, you've made it in Pakistan. So I'm really exactly. So I'm really happy. I'm happy to have achieved that opportunity. So thank you very much. I'm a UN bureaucrat, so I wish I could give you 5 minutes of my time, so you could speak more freer than I will be able to speak. But I want to start this by reminding all of us that genocide is a legal term, and it's an important legal term because we need to know who can declare genocide. It's not something that is available to everybody. It's a political process and defined by the judiciary. In international law, that determination is either made by the ICJ, which is now considering few cases, but there's been cases of member states by themselves saying another member state is committing a genocide. And most recently is the 2004 US government declaration that there was a genocide happening in Darfur. And that was the US government determining that the genocide was happening in Darfur. The UN then sent a UN commission of inquiry, and the conclusion was it was very difficult to determine intent. Mass killings alone are not genocide. There's human rights, the international war crimes have been committed, which is self-evident when there's mass killing. But the difficulty with genocide is the intent. It's actually finding the intent. So this takes me to last week. I think it was last week we commemorated 31 years since the Rwandan genocide in Islamabad for the first time, with the support of the Pakistani government and the embassy of Rwanda. And what was very interesting or easier to determine in the Rwandan case was intent was very clear in the Rwandan case. Actually, government and through radios and others were calling for mass extermination of a tribe. Kill the cockroach. You all know Hotel Rwanda, and you probably had a lot of documentation around intent. So, just to remind everybody, the intent part and the legal process of genocide are equally important, because once it's determined, member states under international law are required to intervene and stop.
Yeah.
Because once it's declared, and then the system, the international community have to come together and intervene. Hence, you also see the hesitance, because many may feel a bit hesitant in declaring it, because then they're asked to intervene. So the legal bureaucratic part of this, it's important. And in the recent case, the South Africa brought against Israel, it's ongoing in terms of final determination. I think the word that was used by the ICJ is plausible risk of genocide. And I then called on Israel to do more in preventing that. So that takes me to swiftly to a bit of history of Sudan. For many of you who know, current conflict in Sudan is called the forgotten conflict. You don't see it on our television as much as you see in other conflicts, but the impact on communities and impact on children are extreme. And I'll come to the figures in a little while. But before we go to the current situation of Sudan, I want to take you back to the Sudan of 2004 and the declaration by the US government of a genocide in Darfur. During that process, the ICC intervened and indicted President Omar al-Bashir, you probably know about. There was a clear indictment. Here, the ICC had determined that he individually was liable for what has happened in Darfur. Then he couldn't travel. You all know what happened after that. So the other part of the international legal system is individuals can be liable, and the ICC has recently also indicted the leaders in Israel. Okay, is this better? So recently, the ICC indicted the Israeli leaders. You all know about that. So I just want to say there's difference by an institution and a state committing genocide, and then there's also under international law individual liability that can be a proportion. So in the case of Sudan, an individual liability against its serving president was determined by the ICC, and he ended up never going to trial. He was arrested by his own. There was an internal coup, and he was arrested by his own government. Now, today's Sudan. I'll go quickly through some of the figures. 13 million people have been displaced, including 4 million refugees to the bordering countries, Chad, Egypt, other places. 30 million people require humanitarian assistance. 25 million face acute hunger. 16 million children are in urgent need. Basic services, the state, the epicenter of the conflict is the capital city, an ancient city. A city that has, if you have been there, you will see it's where the blue and the Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet in the middle of the city. Incredible history. Over a very short period of time, the city is gone. Well, two armies were in the same government, one side led by the RSF, a militia that was set up by the army, fighting the army itself in the middle of the capital city. Health services gone, hospitals gone, education centers gone, heavy artillery and air strikes happening inside the capital. An ancient city gone in a very short period of time. Human rights violations, both the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid forces have shown complete disregard for international law. War crimes and crimes against humanity have been documented. Widespread of rape and sexual violence against women, deliberate across the country, have been also reported. Ethnic cleansing, especially what is today's Darfur, ongoing hate speech, incitement, and the United Nations on many occasions warned of genocidal risk. So what's happening in terms of accountability? Many have called for independent investigations and for perpetrators to be held accountable. But the biggest challenge in Sudan is access. To be able to record, to see what has happened is quite impossible. So this makes sometimes what we call the hidden and closed conflict, because you don't have a lot of journalists roaming around Sudan. And to be frank, it's not that interesting to the international community. It's just, that's the way it is. It's a conflict among the poor. Killings among the very poor. Very few international attention you see, even in funding for humanitarian response. So the United Nations, we're very much present. We've been in Sudan for decades. We stay, and my colleagues are on daily basis trying to help communities survive. So far, we've reached 16 million people in Sudan with humanitarian aid. The UN has called for funding of 6 billion for 2025, and only 12% have been funded for humanitarian response. The Secretary General has appointed a special personal envoy a very well-known diplomat, Lamlamra. He's worked a lot in the region. Secretary General is pushing for mediation among the groups who are fighting. But what doesn't help is inflow of arms. Sudan does not produce arms, but the ammunitions don't seem to be running out, and the role of other member states is one of concern to the United Nations. So the Secretary General has called for the implementation and enforcement of what they call the Jeddah Declaration.
What declaration is
Jeddah,
Jeddah
yeah.
Declaration.
So the challenges that we're facing, I've just mentioned bureaucratic and access issues, the killing and the targeting of aid workers, and the severe funding shortages have been extremely problematic for Sudan. And again, this touches to the issue of, if you look at the experience of the Rwandan genocide, international community did not intervene. And I think you will agree one of the main reasons is, again, when conflicts happen among the poor or most poorest parts of the world, it just doesn't happen to be a priority for others. I'll finish just by saying those who continue to commit these mass killings in Sudan, I think what we've experienced with the aggressive intervention of ICC should be something hopefully that will deter them. Because the ICC is looking into the Sudan issue, and I think those who are at the forefront are very much aware what that could mean. But unfortunately, the ICC again relies on member states to enforce its rules. So thank you very much, and happy to have any kind of discussions on the Sudan conflict.
Thank you so much for that. Okay. Well, so I think that's a good idea. Let's kick off then. Mushahid? Mike? Okay.
Good morning and assalamu alaikum.
Cool.
Thank you. We've had two very riveting presentations on two different cases of genocide. I'd just like a very brief comment on Dr. Maung Zarni's just a reference to the so-called Judeo-Christian civilization. Because I think that's a very important point when they talk of that. We forget that anti-Semitism has been long embedded in the Christian tradition. And even if you see the literature in the West, the Jew is a bad guy. Fagin the Jew, Charles Dickens. Shylock the Jew, Shakespeare. You know, is made out into a bad character. And in World War II, the Christians of Europe committed crimes against humanity against the Jews of Europe. And who gave succor, sympathy, and sanctuary to the Jews? The Muslims, historically, even after the Spanish Inquisition. They fled Spain and they went into Morocco. And even we were recently in Morocco, we saw that thing. So I think this is extremely important. And now this myth has been created by the neocons in America about this Judeo-Christian civilization, so that a nexus between the religious right in America and the Zionists in Israel is cemented. So I think that your point is very well taken, and I think that is an element which should be mentioned. And also I'd like to commend Excellency Yahya for this presentation, because what is happening in Sudan is actually a lot of other countries are also complicit on those crimes. I'm sorry to say, it's become a battlefield for a new kind of a mini Cold War, not linked with the superpowers or China or America, but necessarily the regional powers. And I think there's an important and urgent responsibility to stop this crimes against the people of Sudan. Thank you for your very instructive presentations. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is Sarfraz Correjo, life member and member faculty at Institute of International Relations. Shah Abdul Latif University, Khairpur. I have a brief question from Excellency Yaya regarding the famine. And other than UN, who others are playing their role just to provide the food security to the victims of crisis? Thank you.
The NGOs, civil society organizations also play an incredible role in helping communities who have been displaced. In the context of Sudan, I think, as usual, any conflict, unfortunately, is normally started by men, and it impacts women and children disproportionately. And in the context of Sudan, that's what's happening. And millions of Sudanese have moved into neighboring countries such as Chad and others. And the UN is also providing humanitarian support in the neighboring countries.
The Catholic Church was responsible for, centuries of persecution against the Jewish population across Europe. Ghetto was a Roman word. The first ghetto was in Rome, Italy. Yeah? Ghetto, like spaghetti. Like Italian Roman word. And the second point, everyone has heard of Magna Carta, the Great Charter. 3,000 words. There were 3 articles describing when not to pay the loans back to the Jewish financiers. Have a look. There's not just a religious, prejudice against the Jewish people as Christ killers. And Golda Meir was born in Kiev. At the age of 5, she, migrated with 2 sisters and mother to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where her father got a job. And she said as a girl, she remember cowering in the basement of an apartment when the Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox Christians paraded around across Kiev carrying signs, "Kill the Christ killers." And all her father could do was boarded up the entrance and everyone hide. Right? And so this has nothing to do with the world. This is like, anti-Semitism, hatred and fear of Jewish people is quintessentially white European tradition. It had nothing to do with Muslim. And you talk about Spanish Inquisition. The Jews were liberated and had the most liberal life under the Moors in Granada, places like that. And then also Amartya Sen talk about in argumentative Indian. Mughal rule was extremely tolerant towards, different, And so I think like we have a extremely distorted, deliberately distorted narrative. And then this brother's, comment about poor people killing each other. The Western media didn't take that. It's Orientalist tribals. They killed each other, right? The Nazis got the bad press. It's not that they were not like, heinous or like, vicious, monstrous type of killers. But it was the first mass killing that took place on the white European Christian continent. Something they have been doing like, for centuries to other people. Huh? Yeah. Sorry.
Can we move on to, are there any other questions?
I'm sorry I'm a little late on the comments on Sudan, but I'd just like to, for the record, tell you that in 2004, a delegation led by Riaz Khokhar from God bless his soul, had gone to Sudan to discuss with the then president on behalf of our president Darfur and what could be done to help ameliorate the situation. Just as a snapshot, when we went there, we arrived in one major hotel. That was the major hotel there at that time. And on the ground floor, in the lobby, there were 2 major groups of people that were there, which reflect on what Darfur was all about. 1, oil magnates, and 2, evangelists. And they all wanted South Sudan to be created in order to, I'm not saying it's an artificial creation, but they all wanted South Sudan to be created so that Sudan could be devoid of its oil wealth. And that's where a lot of these problems arose from. The reality is, it was an African problem. It should have been sort of dealt with by Africa itself, but it took a life of its own, not only because the world was sort of paying attention or whatever, but Kofi Annan had come to Geneva and spoke at an ILO conference and made a huge thing about Darfur at that time. There were things that could have been worked with, but look at the situation in Sudan now, in complete disarray.
Thank you. Questions. We want questions rather than comments. Aisha, I think.
Yeah, my question will follow, but I have a philosophical comment to make to contextualize the
Make that brief.
Yes, I'll make it brief. When we talk about genocide, I think the definition is deliberate and systematic destruction of a national, ethnic, or regional group with the intent to destroy and eliminate it. So can I go back in time to ask our esteemed panelists, what do they think about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt? Was that genocide? What do they think of the elimination of the native Indian Americans at the hands of the Europeans? Was that a genocide? And if we think that, greed, hate, selfishness is part of the human DNA, how is it that we can prevent genocide from happening in the future? And because I work in climate change, I'm going to link that with scarcity of resources, burgeoning of population, and more reasons for genocide to happen in the future. How do we prevent
Excellent.
that?
It's a very difficult question because it always goes back to, I think genocide is specifically legal because it has consequences and it has to be determined by a legal body. So for us in the UN, the ICJ is the right platform for that. The second part is intent. War crimes are war crimes, easy. People have been killed, they've been murdered, we can see, we can determine. On the genocide is the intent part makes it very, very difficult. And I said in the case of Darfur, the UN Commission could not prove intent. Of course, there were mass killings of people by the Janjaweed, who's now mainly the RSF.
Yes.
Who was set up by the then al-Bashir government, who've now destroyed half of Khartoum, which what has happened in Khartoum. So I mean, if you go back to history, if I put on a lawyer's hat, I'll have to ask the Pharaoh his intent. And that is what you need to be able to, in a legal term, to define. Otherwise, without that, the word could be used and everybody can declare everybody else. Recently, you've seen in the media, there are people online saying there is a genocide going in South Africa against white South Africans, which I think many people agree is pretty ridiculous, but it's been used, genocide is good. So genocide is used a lot by people, and we, at least bureaucratic and international system, we have to agree that there has to be a process. And that process, for example, in the case of Israel, is going through ICJ with the South African case, and that will be declared soon.
Yes.
Two parts. One is historical. You talk about the biblical exodus, right? And when Raphael Lemkin started to think about this issue, he was interested in the destruction of populations in antiquity. So he would go back all the way, not to the biblical exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, but as far away as the 13th or 12th century, the Tatars, the Mongolians, overran all the way to Hungary, Budapest, Krakow, Poland, St. Petersburg, right? And in Krakow, they were said to have taken away 20,000. Then like Polish or whatever the terminology at the time, the children away. That's why the last transfer of children from one group to other became the fifth article, act of genocide in the convention. And then he was also looking at the samurais persecuting converted like poor lower class Japanese, by the Jesuits, in Nagasaki Island area. That's the 12th century. And then what really motivated him to push himself intellectually was the Armenian genocide.
Which is a criminal offense in Turkey, of course, if you mention it.
Yeah, you can mention. You cannot talk about it.
You have to keep that in mind.
So if you have a Turkish friend, don't bring up Armenian genocide, and then you will lose friendship, unless they are a critical intellectual. But on the legal issue, Genocide Convention was adopted on the 9th of December, 1948, a day before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted on the 10th of December. And the very same year, Israel declared itself independent, destroyed nearly 600 villages and 11 cities, driven out 750,000 Arab Palestinians. And Ben Gurion was ordering his, troops to mass execute so that they would never even dream of coming back. That's why the Palestinian, one of the symbols is the key. If you go to a Bethlehem, the refugee camp, there's a massive gate with the key. A lot of Palestinian keeps the keys because they're thinking that we just lock the doors and we'll come back, right? They were never allowed to come back. The right of return is not there. But the problem is the Genocide Convention has never served as a deterrent because it has never been applied against any state in its 70 plus years since inception in 1948. Srebrenica, it was act. Genocidal act was committed, but the state of Serbia was never, found guilty of genocide. It's utterly toothless. That's why, when we turn to, the international law,
they did though bring Milosevic to
face
trial, which is better than most.
How many Western heads of states have been found guilty of war crimes?
Even if one is found guilty of war crimes, we'll have made some advance. I think what we're going to have to do now, as we approach 10 to 11, is hand over to Dr. Shaista Tabassum to give us, give her the mic, to give us her analysis of these very difficult issues with regards to genocide and impunity. So please.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me first start by thanking Dr. Masuma Hasan and the team. They have given me this opportunity of sharing my views on very sensitive matter, that is the genocide and impunity in Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. Well, most of the part has already been covered by the two panelists because I was about to talk about the introduction, like what is genocide and what is impunity. But let me start from what one of the participants have asked, that there are different types of genocide. It's not only that mass killing of the people, but there are even ecological genocides, cultural genocides, religious, ethnic, these are others, economic genocides. And some genocides which are going on, they are on surface and some are very quiet behind the scene, and that have not been reported. So the world is experiencing, the people, actually, the sufferers are the people. And I must add what you have said, that it's not only the state which is conducting genocide, it's the society. It's with full participation and approval of the society. So it means that the entire nation is involved in the genocide of people. Well, there are what I was supposed to do, that first explain the genocide and impunity, and then I will apply the examples to what is happening in different parts, especially in the Middle Eastern region. The techniques of the genocide everywhere is same, that is the mass killing. The cleansing of large portion of the population. And if I look into the examples or the case study of Lebanon, for example, from 2003 to 2024 December, almost 4,000 people were killed and 100,000, more than 100,000 have been displaced. Then in Syria, the conflict in Syria, which began in 2011, there were many actors in the Syrian conflict, the government of the Bashar al-Assad, the opposition, the ISIS, and their targets were different. Their targeted killing to the opposition, the minorities, the Christians, the Shia Muslims by the ISIS. And then the Bashar al-Assad government had a different option of, targeted the killing of different people. But altogether, there were very large number of people who were killed. Not only that, but the displacement has also been reported. So mass killing, displacement from their hometown and home places, the sexual abusement, and then cultural destruction. These are the four identical methods of all the genocides that have been reported. Two of the genocides have been mentioned one by the Rohingya people, the Darfur, but two others are required some mentioning. One is the Rwanda, and the other was the Bosnian genocide in 1992 and onward, and then the mechanism that had been created. Let me just briefly go through the impunity. Impunity, it's a critical factor that often underpins the occurrence and perpetuation of genocide. The lack of accountability for perpetrators of these crimes. Impunity is a complex and multifaceted phenomena that can be defined as the absence of punishment or legal violations of crime. It can occur at the individual, institutional, and societal level. That is the exercise of power without accountability. It takes place when crimes, from minor offenses to serious human rights violations, are not adequately investigated, and the perpetrators are not convicted, and the victims, they do not receive reparation. Impunity not only denies justice to victims, but also undermines public trust in state institutions and the rule of law, thus fueling the repetition of crimes and legal violation. So the relationship between genocide and impunity is complex. Actually, impunity facilitates genocide, and the occurrence of genocide can lead to prolonged period of impunity for those who are responsible. In Syria, there were, as I have said, that how and why it is called as the genocide and where the impunity actually works. The situation in Syria was very complex, and it is still. The problem was that despite of the credible evidences of killing, mass killing, and high officials who were directly or indirectly involved into the killing of people, there was no accountability system that had been introduced at the domestic level, not at the international level. Then when the issue was submitted to the Security Council, China and Russia vetoed the resolution. The reason was that it was penned by United States. So it was their own internal issue. It was their own political problem that China and Russia actually blocked the resolution, which was supposed to be, if it was passed, it would refer the case to the International Criminal Court. Then the International Criminal Court has certain limitations. So it can only work when the domestic system is unable to trial the violators or the criminals. But since the Syrian system was unable, therefore, the matter was supposed to be referred to the International Criminal Court, which was blocked by Russia and China. As far as the Palestine issue is concerned, the occupied territories of Palestine, there are declared and documented atrocities that has not only been reported in the media, but has been publicly said and endorsed by the Israeli officials. Large number of prominent Israeli officials have said publicly that they want to clean Palestine, the Gaza Strip. They want to evacuate. All the people should leave. They will reconstruct whatever their plans are. But there are documented proof that they have planned for the displacement of almost all the people in Palestine, in Gaza. And not only in Gaza, but there is also, the target is not Gaza, but the occupied, West Bank as well. Then, despite of repeated violations of the principles of international law, no sanctions have been imposed on Israel. No legal action, no sanctions have been imposed, and this is in fact why, because there is a very concrete support available to Israel in the United Nations Security Council and in the General Assembly. And it's by United States. US has vetoed the resolutions that were submitted against Israel in the Security Council. And some of the domestic actions that have been taken by the United States and the European states when they have targeted that particular group of people who have been raising voice in favor of the Palestinians. Some legal actions have been taken, especially the one they have revoked the visa of the petitioner of the international ICC's prosecutor to United States. Now, what are the legal umbrella available to address the issue of genocide and impunity? There are actually three documents which have been often quoted. One is the convention, the Genocide Convention, which he talked about the 1948 Genocide Convention. Then there is a four set of the laws, the international humanitarian law you call. And the Fourth Geneva Convention is specifically about the civilian rights. Then finally, the International Criminal Court or the Rome Statute. So these are the three legal documents available. And most of the time, people mix up that what is the international humanitarian law and the human rights laws. The International Criminal Court has a wide application. I mean, its area is where the violators of the international humanitarian law may be referred to. At the same time, United Nations Security Council can also take any violation of the international law, because this is also the violation of international law, what is going on in Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. The umbrella can function. I mean, the ICC's has certain limitation. International Criminal Court has limitation. One limitation is that it can refer the case or hear the cases which are with the violations which are conducted in the member states, right? So US, China, Russia, Israel, these are not India. These are not the members of the Rome Statute. Second is that it can also hear the cases if the violation is done by the member or in the member state. So in the territory of the member state means that if something is going on in, for example, because Palestine state has now become the member of the ICC Rome Statute. So any violation that is happening in Palestine may be referred to the International Criminal Court. But the problem, the legal hurdle, is the Security Council. Security Council can always interrupt the working of the ICC by passing a resolution. So even if the ICC is able to do, it can be blocked by the Security Council. So impunity is working. And I am going to conclude. Sir, what you have said that there are many things which are legally defined in international law. So genocide is legally defined, but it doesn't declare genocide as legal. It's an illegal act. So international law actually defines many illegal acts as well, and genocide is one of them. So I think that I have given the outline of the discussion. So if you allow me, it's open for discussion and comments, please.
Thank you. Can I just say that it's 11, but I have been told I have got 10 minutes to run overtime. Is that okay? All right, so I suggest we sort of keep it between 5 and 8 minutes of an interactive session, and then I'll just sum up in 2 minutes. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay, fire away then. Questions then, please.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
My name is Anusha Alam. I'm a social worker. And
Sorry,
My name is Anusha Alam and I'm a social worker. I believe in peace and unison. I'm a part of PIIA, fortunately. My question is to Muhammad Yahya. It may be a very naive question, but has the United Nations ratified the Palestinian genocide? Have they? That's one question. The ICJ ruling on Palestine genocide. And the other question is, why are they given full membership, the Palestinians given full membership?
Why haven't they been given full? Okay, right. So let's leave that for you, since you are the UN spokesman. If you could just respond very quickly to the two questions. Firstly, has the UN, quote unquote, ratified a Palestinian genocide? And two, why haven't the Palestinians become a member of the United Nations, full membership? Those are the two questions.
So the good thing is sitting next to a doctor is that she's agreed to help out. On the first question I mentioned that there was a case brought by South Africa and other countries joined that case. The first emergency declaration by the ICJ was the plausible risk. Now they are looking into making a conclusion. So that is the way the ICJ is working around whether a genocide has been committed or not. In terms of war crime, it's very self-evident, right? More children have died in Gaza than recorded conflict. It's in the UN, we've lost nearly 200 UN staff have been bombed and died in Israel. The largest UN losses in any conflict on earth. So the killings of children, women, the destruction of property, the restriction of human right access, those are all clear. There's no doubt about that. Also 150 journalists. Yeah. And yeah, the largest death on journalists. So those issues are clear. But the question of determination of a genocide is not done by the Secretary General. It's not us who determine. It's a legal process, and that is where it's going. But the doctor wanted to help on this.
What I was saying, I was suggesting him that it is a number of resolutions have been passed by the United Nations General Assembly. So the Security Council work has been blocked, but you can see that large number of resolutions have been passed. Related to the decision of the ICJ, what you have mentioned, actually it was an advisory opinion. It had nothing, the advisory opinion lacked the implementation. So it can be, but obviously again with the, it's again legal and complicated procedure. The ICC has issued warrant of Benjamin Netanyahu, but look what is happening. He cannot go to the place where, which is a signatory of the ICC. He went to Hungary, the Belgium. Even Vladimir Putin's warrants have been issued, but he went to Mongolia and they had not arrested. So there are many examples of the violation. It's a very weak system. It's a very weak system.
Yes.
You wanted to...
Great.
Thank you. My name is Abbas Andy. I'm a member of the Institute. I just want to point out one interesting fact about genocide. God himself has filed a suit, a case against Israelis in the Bible,
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
it's a case about.
Sorry, but we're not here to talk about divinity and God. We're going to be talking about the here and now. Can you just, direct your question to today's discussion? I don't recall anyone talking about God and divinity here. So, if that is your question, this is not the forum.
I'm just saying that the Israelis, the question of genocide is something which is it is something which even God has condemned.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Can we have questions, perhaps?
Thank you very much, Doctor. So my question is about the initiatives that is now being developed by South Africa with the ICG, and also there is a group, the Hague group, who wants to pressure the great powers to back the ICG rulings on Gaza. What do you think is the future with the lack of interest from the United States with these initiatives? And also with the ICC, I think ICC has made some and recently has made some rulings or some issues about Rohingya with the Myanmar leadership, for example. But how can we improve the authority and enforcement so that they can make a progress in international politics related to genocide? Thank you.
Guys, do you want to take that? There was a reference, though, to Myanmar, but
Yeah.
do you want to?
Sorry.
You've been quite
Yeah.
silent, so.
Sorry. There are two cases before ICJ. One is the Gambia versus Myanmar case that was filed by the African state of Gambia with the support of OIC members, right? And the other is the South African versus the state of Israel, filed after the Gambia case. Both cases are in the merit phase, as the lawyers call it, and the provisional measures have been issued on the ground that there is a high plausibility that both signatory states of Israel and Myanmar have breached the convention. They have dishonored their obligation. There's a high plausibility. So it's not been declared genocide. But in terms of how to improve legal instruments, well, the world is it has not really been rule-based. It's power-based. And so I think we should stop pretending that our world is somehow anchored in some kind of moral foundations and legal framework. That's a rhetoric that we buy into, and all the imperial powers. One characteristic of any imperialism is self-provided impunity. They are above the law. They create the law. They interpret the law. They choose where to implement and not to implement. So we need to stop looking at the law as the answer. Finally, I think we need to also stop creating and embracing this hierarchy of crimes. Genocide is, forgive me, it has become a sexy term. But they're no less than no less worse than war crimes or crimes against humanity. And so I think this is the trap we must not fall into. And then on the intent, we are all biological beings. If a state is cutting off supply of sustenance, clean water, food, medicine, shelter, creating insanitary situations to live. Even the convention has Article 3, creating conditions to destroy life. We have to infer from the deeds. Hitler didn't say we're going to kill all the Jews. And even Final Solution, it was a technical document. And so like if we are going to look for this like a declaration of intent, I think like this is a legal trap we have to avoid.
Thank you. Just before I begin to wind down, I think there's time just to take one more question.
My name is Safa. I'm a researcher here at the Institute. I have a question for the panel. Is it ever legitimate for the international community to allow limited, targeted military intervention to prevent genocide, even if it technically breaks the traditional norms of sovereignty?
Shasta, do you want to pick that up?
Yes. Well, there are different rules of international law, which are like one of the suggestions which I wanted to give is that there must be some preventive measures to be taken when genocide is about to and information are coming that the mass killing and people are being targeted in certain places. So there must be some precautionary measures to be taken, and this is in fact one of the rule of international law which comes under the use of force, preemptive attack or preemptive measures. But I think that there is a very strong, you can say, a bubble of the state sovereignty which is present, and state sovereignty is actually a real hurdle in the implementation of many principles of international law, legal principles, because sometimes the state allow interference, intervention, but many times it's the issue of their sovereignty that they don't want to be like party to any treaty. And so if any state or the group of the state decides to have some military intervention before the outbreak of any crisis like genocide, military intervention, that would contradict the state's sovereignty, and it will become the main issue and hurdle. So I think that what I believe is that the institution should be made strong, the judicial institution. There are some structural flaws. There is no implementation mechanism available behind the International Court of Justice, behind the International Criminal Code. So there must be some strong mechanism. But again, what I am seeing in this world politics, it's a power politics. So the big powers, as I have mentioned, Russia, China, India, Israel, they have not signed major documents. So if they are not the signatory of the documents, how could the principles of law be applicable on them?
Thank you. Thank you, Shasta. Well, I'm going to start to wind down now. I've basically had my say, but I think what has been clear from today's discussion is just how complex the relationship is between terms like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and mass deportation. And I think we have to be aware precisely how we use these terms, whether there is a risk of deploying them too loosely. Can we, for example, assume that ethnic cleansing amounts to genocide? There is, whether one likes it or not, a legal definition of genocide today in the UN statute books. Does mass deportation amount to genocide? The scale of killings, although they might be horrific, does that amount to genocide? I think we've had some indication that a lot depends on precisely what you do with this notion of intent, which is, as Maung has said, is one that is extremely problematic and very, very difficult to establish. I think the other thing that's come out, perhaps not to the degree that I would have wanted, is the role of external middle powers in aiding and abetting, whether it's genocide, whether it's mass deportation or ethnic cleansing. I mean, we saw it in Rwanda, clearly a genocide, where France, a member of the Security Council, actively precluded any decision of those mass killings being defined as genocide. And today, of course, this horrific untold violence that we see in Sudan, again, aided and abetted by regional states such as the United Arab Emirates. A lot there then for all of us to chew on. It remains for me only to thank my panelists for some excellent presentations, and of course to thank all of you for being here this morning. Thank you. Thank you.